Say hi, I'm Matt Stella. This is the only part I'm nervous. Hi, I'm Matthew Stella from Jackpine, and I'm sitting here in front of this shrine, what used to be a shrine, with graphic designer Kevin Lowe from Montreal, and he's going to be speaking at Jackpine Friday, May 15th at 7 p.m. So Kevin's the publisher of this zine called 4 Minutes to Midnight, and obviously very heavily influenced by the protests in Montreal, not the ones that just recently occurred, but from
2012.
2012. I'm wondering if you could just tell me a bit about how that inspired this.
Yeah, well, I was very active, sort of helping to organize, not on an organizational level. I wasn't a student, but doing sort of cultural solidarity work, so organizing events, interventions, working with artist-run centers, etc., doing posters, etc., to support the student movement. And now, with 3 years hindsight, I can really sort of recognize what a special time that was in that city, where really the day-to-day changed, dramatically over the course of a summer or a spring and summer, and sort of a lot of possibilities opened up in terms of popular action, how people inhabit the city, how people inhabit space. This zine, the sort of ideas for the zine trickled through over just like how do we as activists or artists, etc., engage with the city after that sort of peak moment, and how do we try and continue to build on that momentum. Graphic design and web design and all these sort of new-ish industries are really, really celebrated as the future of the economy. At the same time, as someone who's actually working in the field, trying to run a studio, and I'm sure, maybe similar situations to Jackpine, it's not easy, number one, but whoever said life should be easy. Yeah. But not only is it not easy, I think it's setting new sort of standards for what, how does work operate? Everyone is atomized. Everyone is working in an incredibly competitive, precarious state, working as freelancers, as entrepreneurs, with none of the social benefits that any sort of traditional unionized labor movement might have provided.
That thinking about the industry obviously kind of bleeds through the pages in this. Have you gotten a lot of feedback about your work and, people who kind of hadn't really seen it that way or hadn't looked at kind of the labor side of design?
Yeah.
Is it something people have a tough time conceptualizing?
I think what's important is, again, like what I was saying, I don't want to say, oh, woe is us designers necessarily. I wouldn't want to place ourselves in a sort of comparative positioning with, people that are in real precarious works. All that whole world of marginal labor, we're miles and miles away from that. But I think the system is the same, and we're in a position to critique that. We're in a position of quote unquote power, having these tools and having this ability to have a voice, to do an interview, etc. So I think it's important to bring that up, and I think this is happening also not just in design, but in all sorts of cultural labor. Everyone's a freelancer now, everyone's an entrepreneur, and all this sort of pressure of effective work, all this sort of pressure that's of unpaid work, is there, and it's only going to get more. So unless we start building some sort of solidarities and look to other struggles, look to struggles of overworked and underpaid people, which is what we are, but to see how other people have organized and to see what maybe we can learn from them, then I think we might be able to be in a position where we can amplify that voice using our skills.
I can see a lot of influence, this kind of protest aesthetic, and in the design in this magazine. And in particular, there's this one section you write: graphic design is a shell game, a cheap hustle, when it could be a language. So obviously, you're kind of bringing politics and design together, and one is kind of influencing the other. I was wondering if you could maybe unpack that statement a little bit.
That article is entitled Shock Troops and Cheerleaders, and I sort of see graphic design as the shock troop and cheerleaders of sort of a precarious labor force. The idea of design is really glorified, and even in the mainstream media now, much more than it was, let's say, even 10 years ago when I was studying, we see the word design thrown everywhere: designer homes, designer this, design thinking, and all these sorts of things. And it's really, really glorified. But when you actually look at what the discipline is doing, I think on some levels, it's how I say, it's a shell game. It's just a hustle, and we're constantly just producing more and more sort of commodity-based work. When I think graphic design as a sort of traditional role coming out of, let's say, the printing trades, etc., really had an important social role as well in terms of informing the public, in terms of carrying culture forward, in terms of challenging the status quo. And so I think it could be, a very rich language of general discussion, and it's great that there's a popularity and people are concerned about design. But when you see most of it, it just becomes a sort of sheen of elitism. So I'd like to see a lot more cross-disciplinary solidarity, and I think, I still believe in the power of design very, very much. So I think we're in a really privileged position to show that solidarity, to act on that solidarity, and then to hopefully amplify various struggles. And that's what I try and do with my practice. And in the zine, it's a bit more of the sort of poetics of that, but I also try and do that on a practical level with work that I do at the studio.
Where can people find this?
They can buy it. They can buy it online from my website, lokidesign.net, and it's also available in a few stores in Montreal and hopefully in Ottawa soon. I don't know what that store was. Possible World. So we might try and drop some off at Possible World too.
Cool.
So, yeah.
So yeah, look for this at Possible Worlds and hopefully, and come by Jackpine Friday, May 15th, 7 p.m.
Thanks a lot.